After nearly a decade, Xenoverse 3 is finally real. But this isn't just another sequel, it might completely redefine what Dragon Ball games are going forward. So today, we're breaking down everything we know about Xenoverse 3 and how it stacks up against Kakarot, Xenoverse 2, and Sparking Zero. Let's get into it. Alright, so this was officially announced at Dragon Ball Battle Hour of this year. That was like a couple weeks ago actually. The release window is for 2027. It's going to be on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. They might have a Switch port later on, but that might take potential years. It was originally teased as Project Age 1000, and it's going to be set. The setting of the game is in that new age, in a completely new timeline with a newer version of West City. It will feature original characters designed by Akira Toriyama, like this John 1000 guy. The focus of the story appears to shift from Time Patrol to a new hero squad that looks to be Great Saiyaman inspired. There's no gameplay yet. There's only the cinematic trailer and in-game engine footage that has been shown. So as you guys can see, this is not Xenoverse 2.5. This is a completely new, revamped experience that's going to be releasing for us next year. And I like how they paid homage to the Xenoverse 2 game in the beginning when they played the music, the initial theme. I like the new song, if that's going to be the new song that was playing the girl who they featured in the trailer. But this new timeline, it equals freedom from replaying Dragon Ball Z arcs again. The shift away from Time Patrol, it's risky, but I think it's a much needed evolution to push the franchise and the genre forward, because who knows where they may take this Xenoverse series. They may intend to make even more and more games in the future. And if the lifespan of Xenoverse 2 is indicative of anything, is that this game can have just the same degree of longevity as that game had. And perhaps it'll be even better, because as technology, as video games, as the storylines, as developers continue to progress and get better at their craft, I think we will see that reflected in the games that we purchase and ultimately buy. So, it's still early. There's no gameplay yet, so just temper your expectations. I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody that. But we're all are ecstatic just for the return of the anime. It's broken the internet literally multiple times. And quite frankly, I'm one of those people who, it doesn't take much to please me. I just want new Dragon Ball content, whether it's a new game, new manga, new anything. I have a huge collection, so anything that can scratch that itch, that's fine for me. So just because we're all hyped for Xenoverse 3, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't things they can improve upon from its predecessor. Now, Xenoverse 2 lasted nearly 10 years with DLC support, and the final DLC saga, the Future Saga Chapter 4, that drops in this year. Now, I bought Xenoverse 2, I had it for PlayStation, and I also have played it on my Switch. But the thing I think they can improve upon, the combat, I think it needs to evolve. It needs to be less floaty, it needs to have more impact, so to speak. I want to see more expansive environments upon which we fight. I want them to be more destructive, kind of akin to Sparking Zero. It doesn't have to be to that same degree, because obviously these are two different games, but they're all still inclusive within the Dragon Ball universe. I would like to see that. I would like to see more originality from the story, because my prominent issue with Dragon Ball games is that they strike me as lazy sometimes, because they lack the originality and just retell the Saiyan through Buu saga all the time. Like, can we get a brand new original story? If you have to reuse the Saiyan through Buu saga, maybe perhaps do a one-time installation into the story just for that game. Create a one-time spin-off universe, just similar to how it was in Sparking Zero, actually, where you're going and you're progressing through the original Saiyan through Buu saga as Goku, Vegeta, and all the other characters, but there are certain events that transpire if you make different decisions. It would be nice to see certain things like that in this game. Not exactly like Sparking Zero, because obviously, again, they're two different games, but give it its own unique spin if you just have to use the Saiyan through Buu saga storytelling for the umpteenth time. But based on what we've seen from the trailer, I think we'll get something that's original. I think they also need to, the CAC system, I think that also needs to be more expansive, because we need more transformations, more choices, more consequences, more player engagement, because they seem to focus predominantly on just the Saiyans, which I get it. Goku, Vegeta, they're the Saiyans. They're amazing. They're the best. But the other races, they kind of seem irrelevant. They kind of seem obsolete in the grand scheme of the Xenoverse game and genre and IP, because the Saiyans are the ones who are acquiring all the upgrades and the power-ups. They have Super Saiyan 1 through 3, God, Super Saiyan Blue, whatever may have you. They even have Ultra Instinct. I'm not sure if the other races can acquire that in Xenoverse 2. I haven't tried it because I usually always play with a Saiyan, hence why I'm bringing this up, because the Saiyans just predominantly are the choice of race that gamers go for. So I would like to see more expansion in towards of not only the components and the factors that tie into each individual race, Namekian, Earthling, whatever, but also into the transformations and things that are at their disposal, or the abilities that they have, so that they don't just fall behind. They're going to fall behind regardless, but at least so they don't fall behind to a staggering degree from the Saiyans. Now, mind you, let me preface this by saying that I've always logged into the Xenoverse 2 game offline. I know you have the option to go online, and from what I've heard from that, because I haven't played it online myself, is that it can be kind of laggy. It can be kind of inconsistent in terms of the experience that you're going to have with it, and that latency. I hope that can be resolved when it comes to Xenoverse 3, and that gamers don't complain as much about that, and that could be something that they can resolve and something that they can fix. Now let's directly compare the two. 3 versus 2. And in Xenoverse 2, there was a huge roster and years of DLC support. The Time Patrol storyline spanned across Dragon Ball history, and the strong CAC system, I think that's something that is intimately tied to Xenoverse 2. Xenoverse 1 is essentially obsolete when it comes to the create a character system. Now, with the Xenoverse 2 as well, it's content heavy, but it's repetitive. It's just over and over and over again. Whereas with the Xenoverse 3, I think it could potentially be less content at launch, but there will be more originality, more diversity, more variability in terms of the gameplay. And I think we'll see more changes, more positive changes to the overall interface of this game. And I think people will be generally pleased with that, because it won't necessarily be the same thing as Xenoverse 2. So I think the biggest difference is that Xenoverse 2 equals quantity, whereas Xenoverse 3 equals direction and identity. So when instilling Sparking Zero into this comparison, when you look at that game, that's an arena fighter, Budokai Tenkaichi style. There's a massive roster focus and new DLC that's going to be adding 30 plus characters and new game modes. Now, Sparking Zero, I think, is pure combat fantasy. That's just you simply having fun with actually partaking in the Dragon Ball universe as a fighter. Xenoverse 3, I think that equals RPG plus story plus customization. The key difference regarding those two things, these two games, is that Sparking equals you play as Goku. As I said, you play as someone who is a part of the Dragon Ball universe, whereas Xenoverse is you become your own Saiyan, you become your own person, you become your own character, and you kind of bridge away from the mainline Dragon Ball fighters. Of course, you engage with them, you interact with them in terms of the story, in terms of training, just like in Xenoverse 2. You could pick one of them to be your master, to learn new skills from them, things of that nature. But you create your own story, so to speak, because you're working as your own character. Now, whether we're going to be playing as the new guy that we saw in the former trailer, or we're going to be playing as John 1000, either way, you have your own person to progress through that story. So I think that's something that differentiates it from Sparking Zero, which seems to be purely Dragon Ball fun. And it's nice that they actually included more game modes to it now to give the game some more depth. All right, now let's also talk about Kakarot and throw that into the conversation, which is a story-driven RPG. It retells the Dragon Ball Z narrative, but there's limited character customization. Now, it also, I think it equals the best narrative experience because it focuses on Goku's story as he progresses through all the sagas, and then also obviously as well they add additional DLC from the subsequent series except for Super. But with Xenoverse 3, it equals more of a player-driven story potential, I think it will have, whereas your decisiveness and your choices as the CAC, that will determine whether or not how the story unfolds. Now, that's just a theory, that's just speculation, because we have no details about that right now, but we'll just see how that unfolds. I think Kakarot feels like you're watching Dragon Ball Z, whereas Xenoverse feels like you're actually living inside the Dragon Ball Z world. Now, personally, I think if Xenoverse 3 delivers, I think it has the potential to become one of the most complete Dragon Ball games ever, probably the most complete Dragon Ball game ever, because Xenoverse 2, just the longevity of that game, it's kind of akin to something that's just timeless. It's nice. I haven't been keeping up with all of the gameplay and all of the newest additions, but it's nice to see how the game has just persisted since 2016. I've been playing this game since I was in 10th grade in high school. So just to see the game continue to go on and go on and go on, it has refused to die and refused to perish. I think if that can be indicative of anything, it could probably be indicative of the fact that Xenoverse 3 has the potential to do the very same thing. And as long as they keep expanding the universe, which they have clearly done with this trailer, there's a bunch of new characters who have been designed by Akira Toriyama who will be included in this. So the possibilities for story directions, for character development, for narration, for narratives, all of that is endless because of the inclusion of new Dragon Ball content to continue to expand the universe. And I say this as someone who my favorite Dragon Ball game of all time is probably Rage and Blast 2, which I think is kind of beefy of a game. But by today's standards, I want to see games that just far surpass that. Because when I compare games like Spark and Zero to Rage and Blast 2's roster, I'm pretty sure Rage and Blast 2 has more, if not on equal footing, because as I said before, you see a lot of these games, they start to tend and feel like they're lazy, like they're not putting as much effort into it, and they're just rehashing different mechanics, rehashing the graphics, but you're throwing the same core premise of the game at us. That same retelling of the Saiyan saga through the Buu saga. But with Xenoverse 3, I don't think we're going to get that. I think it's going to be far more expansive. If this game fails, I think Spark and Zero will still dominate gameplay because this game fails. Xenoverse 2, though they still create content for it, I don't think it's nowhere near as relevant as Dragon Ball Z Kakarot or as especially not Spark and Zero, because that's the latest installment in the Dragon Ball IP series. So that's probably going to dominate gameplay. I think Kakarot will still dominate storytelling. And also, just a quick side note about Dragon Ball Daima. Now, I like that they put Dragon Ball Daima content into Kakarot. I find it very interesting. There's a lot of people who don't like Daima. And I think that could mainly be in part to the fact that a lot of Dragon Ball fans, or people who claim they're Dragon Ball fans, they haven't actually seen OG Dragon Ball. So I don't see how you could not like Dragon Ball Daima, to be honest, to see that traditional Akira Toriyama humor, those lighthearted moments, and of course the amazing fights. But me personally, I loved it. I watched every single one of them. I may be alone in saying this, but I guess I was the only one who's excited for each and every episode that released for it. So Xenoverse 3, just to wrap all this up, it doesn't just need to be good, but I think it needs to justify why this IP has persisted for more than 10 years. Because right now, this might be the most important Dragon Ball game that's ever been made. I'm Harlem. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.